Your identity helps you navigate the world in daily life by getting what you need to survive and by getting what you want in order to be successful. In developing this identity, you cast yourself in a story that you probably still tell about yourself today. But that story was created when you were a really small child. So the question is, how is that same story working for you now as an adult? And more importantly, how or what will that same story, if it doesn't change, what can you predict about your future? Hi, I'm Beth Strathman. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking about the story you tell about yourself. We all do it. We sort of have a narrative in our heads about who we are and what we're all about and what our life's been all about in terms of sort of this identity or role that we play every day. The interesting thing about the story you tell about yourself is that you are both the author of it and the main character. So they're really two different takes that you have on this story if you really stop to think about it. And in this story, you've cast yourself as in some kind of role, like a villain. Maybe you just felt like you were always seen as the bad kid when you were little. So you, in your own mind even, you have this reputation that you're the villain, right? That you do bad things. Or you're a peacemaker. Or you're something like the black sheep or the outsider. Or maybe you're the hero. In some way, shape, or form, you see yourself in a role that you've cast yourself your whole life. And there's a multitude of characters that, people play in each person plays a different character in their own story, obviously. We don't all have the same story for ourselves. So how do you figure out this story that you tell yourself? And why would you want to do that? The first thing to kind of think about is that you developed this story when you were a very young little critter, right? You were a very small child. And you kind of reinforced the role that you played in your story over and over again, right? Once you got cast in this story, once you cast yourself in this story, then you started to see yourself through that character's lens all the time. And so you sort of kept that character from the time you were a little kid to now. But the real kicker is that you were so young when you developed this story about yourself that you didn't have the cognitive capacity. Your brain wasn't developed fully. So, you couldn't be rational about it. You didn't have all the facts. You didn't see all the perspectives even. And so the story was really based on a very limited perspective and a limited ability to think about what was really happening at the time you cast yourself in your own story. So your story is often inaccurate and incomplete for those reasons. Your story resulted from significant experiences and relationships that you had when you were a child. And it's experiences and relationships that you, if you reflect on them now, that you might find transformative or very difficult, right? Things that really stand out in your life. So, if I think about my own story, things that stand out for me is just oftentimes feeling like I was not what my parents expected me to be. Not that I was a terrible child, I just wasn't ladylike enough or whatever I was supposed to be when I was a kid. And so whether or not that's true, because I didn't really have discussions with my parents about that, that's how it felt on my end of things. So I guess in my story, I kind of cast myself as more of an outsider. So as you cast yourself as a child, think about how that might translate to how you see yourself today. In my case, in some situations throughout my adult life, I've seen myself as an outsider. And sometimes I've just turned that into a positive. It wasn't always a negative. But I certainly found myself playing that same role that I cast myself in as a child. So for you, you might have felt like you were a victim or bullied when you were a child. It may indeed have happened, but perhaps as you've gone into adulthood, do you still find yourself in situations where you feel that same way, where you seem to attract situations and people where you feel like you're put in that same position of being bullied again? Or maybe, again, you might have, have cast yourself in the role of helper when you were a little child, your mommy or daddy's little helper. And maybe even today, you find yourself in that helper role where you're constantly feeling like you have to take care of other people. That might have followed you into adulthood too. So based on your early experiences and the relationships that you had, particularly in your family, then you started to see yourself in a particular light, and that has followed you most likely throughout your life. So again, it's really important to remember that the story that you tell about yourself is not objectively true for all the reasons I stated earlier. Didn't have the cognitive development, don't have other people's perspective. In fact, your story could have started to be creative even before you could talk. So it's pre-verbal. So it's really stored in more primitive or emotional part of your brain rather than a rational, logical part of your brain. So when you developed this story about yourself, there was a lot of room for error. But in creating this story, the really interesting thing to me is that when you created the story, it had a purpose. It was there to help you survive, right? It helped you see the world in a way that made it more digestible for you. You could like cast yourself in a role, and in a way, whatever that role was made sense to you, and it helped you survive getting through whatever it was you were going through as a child. But now, since you're an adult, for your success as an adult, it might just be time to revisit the story that you tell about yourself. In particular, you may want to reflect on how that story is limiting you or getting you stuck. Because if the story doesn't change, and you have some areas in your life where you're stuck or feel limited, if the story doesn't change, you can tell what it's going to predict for your future. You're going to end up repeating the same kind of patterns with other people who feel cast in that same role over and over again. It's not going to change. So the real power of unraveling the story that you tell yourself is twofold. First, it helps you survive as a kid. And secondly, it can be the key, revisiting it and changing it can be the key to your success in the future as an adult. And one way to transform that story into something more supportive of you is to look at how it's impacting you now, how it's keeping you limited or stuck. So if you could relate to the topic in this video today, then please like it and consider subscribing to my channel, and make sure to click the bell so that you get notifications every time I upload new videos. So until next time, continue on with your own personal and professional development. And I'm Beth Strathman. Thank you.